Fantastic week and you're ready for another epic episode. This week, we're doing something special. We're bringing in two special guests who I think are going to motivate you. They're going to inspire you and show you really what's possible when you go all in on your dreams and making your vision for your practice and the impact you want to have possible for you. And so this podcast, of course, we talk about how to grow your own cash practice, how to fill your schedule, how to build a thriving practice. But we also believe that you're more than physical therapists, that there's an impact that you're able to have that goes far beyond what you've ever thought was truly possible for yourself. And so our whole thing is, of course, about starting and scaling your cash practices. But the whole goal and the whole point is that we build these practices so that we can buy back our time, so that we can leverage our abilities and our influence to help grow the profession and to help impact and improve the world in the way that we see fit. Now, Roger and Caitlin here have certainly done that. They've built a successful cash practice. They were able to get that to the point where they were able to give themselves the space and the grace where they were able to start doing other passions of theirs, where they're able to start a successful, start a podcast and start educating clinicians on how to improve their abilities so that as they grow and build their own cash practices, they are actually being good representation of what physical therapy is and can be for the masses. And so, Caitlin, Roger, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, so what I want to do and what Ben and I kind of talked about would be really valuable for our audience is starting at the beginning, a little bit about, when you started your practice, like, why did you start your practice? What was that journey like? And how did you get to the point where you found the space and the time to not only create a podcast, but build another company? And you have done other things on the side. I'm sure, Roger, I know that you have had a very successful sales career as well on the side. So how in the hell are you doing and finding the space to do all of these things? Many can't even find time to have hobbies and do things on the side outside of just hustling to find more patients. Can you tell us a little bit about the beginning and the origin story?
Yeah. One, it has a lot to do with your team, right? Just getting to the end. And Caitlin actually founded her own practice in Texas.
Yeah, we have two different beginnings, and then later on, everything gets intertwined.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So I started because I was, working on an outpatient PT mill. Right. Mm-hmm. I really did it out of necessity, like so many of us do, because I was just grinding. I was seeing 4 patients an hour, every hour on the hour. So you and 3 of your friends would come in. I'd be like, Jordan, Ben, Caitlin, and Tom, come on back, like all at the same time. And I was just grinding my ass off. At the same time, I was also going through a residency in overlapping 2 different fellowships as well. I had to drive 100 miles each way, multiple times a week for. So I was grinding for quite some time. But then my company that was already high volume got bought out by another high volume company. And things went from bad to worse. And I just couldn't do it anymore. Right. I was getting booked with the expectation that there would be a 30% cancel rate. So then I was getting booked with 7 patients an hour, maybe hoping to get down to 4 or 5. And then another therapist would call out and I would take their 4 patients plus all 7 of mine would show up. And it was awful. It was terrible. So I got extremely burnt out and felt very hopeless. And I was like, God, I spent so much time and effort to get into this profession. And I woke up one morning and I was just like, can't do it. I don't want to do it anymore. And I had to ask myself, like, what is it that you don't want to do? Like, you don't want to help people? It's kind of messed up. It's like your whole career. I was like, nah, that's not quite it. I just don't want to do it this way. And this was way back in 2019 before cash PT was like a big thing, right? And I just drove to work and I looked up as I was driving, don't recommend that, how to write a letter of resignation. And when I got to work, I just turned in a 3-week notice and I was like, I'm done. I'm going to figure it out. I know some people that own gyms locally. So at the same day, I was like, hey, you guys think maybe I could see some patients out of your gym, and had some conversations. I ended up subleasing a place with a really terrible deal. It was awful. I was actually in their lobby area treating publicly with like kids running around with like toilet paper stuck to their shoe and shit. They're supposed to build me an office. The horror stories that there are plenty of them along the way with people having a handshake deal and not necessarily fulfilling on it. But that's kind of what led me to starting my practice. What about you?
Yeah, so I had a kind of a similar, but also very different experience. I got out of school, I got my first job, and this is what ties back around into like later mentorship and skill set and all that kind of stuff, and like being lucky enough to end up partnering with Roger. But when I was in my first job, I worked my ass off for the first year. I was trying to do things out in the community, build this whole new service line so we could work with more athletes. And at the end of the year, after like working tons of hours outside of my actual clinic schedule, I got like a 25 or 50 cent raise. And also got shittier hours, and then started getting bounced around from my home clinic, where then I was going to a different clinic in different places of San Antonio every day. And I was like, what? And so that didn't sit well with me. I also hated just the general setup of how we were providing care. And I had become like the neuro balance falls PT just because people put them on my schedule, and I'm really good with like older people. And so, it's not that wasn't great too, but like I got out of school and wanted to work with athletes and lifters. And that was what I was passionate about. And so I left. I started my own practice and did that for a couple of years. And in the process, I met Roger. He had a sales job.
Do my sales.
So, yeah.
Doing good ROI on that sale.
Yeah. We ended up because he was like,
three sales. The third one was her moving to.
Yeah. He's like, hey, if you sell your practice, move to Massachusetts, I'll give you 50% of my business. And I was like, okay. So yeah, we've been partners for the last couple of years. We've worked on, growing the clinic, making it better. I'm a lot of the back end detail kind of work. And then more recently, we have the continuing education course.
Yeah. So like growing to getting to the point where we can do these types of things. Yeah. I mean, you got to build a team, right? You got to build a team that you can trust. And that's really what led me to even having the time to get into sales in the first place, right? Before Caitlin and I partnered, was I got some PTs in here that were like-minded, that I trusted, that did a good job, that were hungry, right? That took the mentorship that I gave them. And I also was able to implement administrative staff that also took all the front-end phone calls and took all of that stuff off of my plate. And there was a period of time where I was just treating from like 10 to 2, like a few days a week. There's a period of time where I wasn't treating at all. And then, some changes, I ended up treating again a little bit, but always having like the team is huge. And then I'm not the most organized person, right? Like I'm big ideas, visionary, like we're just going to get it done. The details will iron themselves out. And Caitlin's like, wait a minute, you didn't talk to an attorney about any of this? Like all these different things we've got going on. I'm like, no, it's good. It's good enough. So then she came in, and that's what's allowed us even more flexibility, is that she has streamlined all of our systems and processes and like gotten everything. So it's very repeatable, and I'm not coming in and just being like, new idea, guys, let's change everything. She's like, hold on, wait a minute. Maybe we just test one thing at a time and we go from there. So finding somebody, honestly, in the business that balances me out has been huge, because the things that I'm very good at and the things that she's very good at are opposing, which means that they work really well together. And I think that's a big thing for somebody to find in a practice or a partner, or like the staff that they bring on, is people like to bring on people that are like themselves, right? Good at the same things, maybe not necessarily always the best outcome, because then we would have two people that are disorganized and think big. I mean, she thinks big too, but not detail oriented.
I think one of the big things too is alignment of mission and where you want to go. And so that's important, like as a partnership, but it's also important with anybody on the team. And so if there's not an understanding and somebody's not on board, then, you're going to be on the wrong boat going where it's going. And so that ultimately would just slow it down. So I think that's been another factor that's had a really big component, or had a really big effect on Roger and Mike's journey, is that we're both like very mission aligned.
Yeah, if everybody that's listening, you guys want some very expensive advice, focus maybe on hiring people on your culture and your vision and your values, because hiring the wrong people is very expensive. Last year, it cost us about $200,000 hiring the wrong people. Yeah.
Brutal. But I mean, you're so right. I mean, that's how it is. Ben and I have more than a handful of experiences where we brought on the wrong person, and you hang on to this like lingering hope that they're just going to like click and change and have a completely different mindset and attitude every single day. And you let them stick around longer than they should, and just brings this toxicity and this just weight to the rest of the team. And then that's not even considering the opportunity cost and the replacement cost of having to then find someone else, and then you stepping in as the owner, having to take on those patients while you find someone else. It's catastrophic to find the right person. Ben, I'm sure you got some horror stories around that you might be going through right this moment.
Yeah. There's a fine line between like optimism and hope and supporting somebody versus, you just don't have the skill set or you're not a good fit. And it's a hard dance.
Yeah.
For most people, it takes too long.
Yeah. And it's always like, oh, I can coach them up. Oh, we just fix this one thing. Like next month will be better. And it never like quite gets there. Right.
Right. But it's actually something that Ben and I want to dig in with the two of you, because we've talked a lot about hiring the right people, about having an aligned mission. And for so many people who relate with you on the fact that you started your practices out of necessity, not because you've always dreamed of being a successful entrepreneur. And for many people in those situations, they can't even see beyond just being able to get 15 patients a week or 15 visits per week. And maybe if, God wills it and all the stars align, get to $10,000 a month, which we all know is actually really simple because we've worked on ourselves to learn that. But as we talked yesterday on your podcast, the Performance Rehab Authority podcast, which I recommend everyone go and check out, there's levels to this. And so from the get-go, when you started, did you always intend on building a team? Did you have this big mission, or in the beginning, was it just like, damn, I got to pay rent?
I'm going to start with that one first, if that's okay. That was actually my second business I'd ever started. The first one I started when I was in PT school. It was an online fitness coaching business. And I hated it because it was also just like all the tax and legal bullshit. And I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to submit when. I'm never doing this again. And I like made a promise to myself. I was like, I'm never going to fucking own a business. And so people would ask me coming out of school, they'd be like, oh, do you ever want to like own your own clinic? And I'm like, absolutely not. And then out of necessity, you're like, wow, this isn't where I want to be. This isn't life. This isn't the job I was promised. And so then you go and make it yourself.
Yeah, similar. I also had a previous business that was actually doing fairly well. I was a head coach at a CrossFit gym, and then the original owner left, and I partnered with somebody to take it over. And it was a terrible partnership, and I swore that I would never, ever have a business partner ever again. But here I am. I also said I would never date a PT ever, too, but like doing both of them. And then I just I felt lied to because I didn't put the time into finding out what PT really was like. I just saw athletes, and I saw Kelly Starrett, and I saw like what was possible and who you could work with. And I had the gym that I was working with athletes in. I guess I was going through PT school, like as a little side hustle and just like as a lab to test things. And then when I got in the clinic, I was like, well, this sucks. This is my first clinical. I was like, this is not quite what I wanted to be doing. So I just started it out of necessity because I got into PT to help athletes. I got into the clinic and I was like, this is not what I thought I was going to be doing. And I hate my life. And I just want to treat patients the way that I want to treat them. I never had any intention of growing a team or doing anything like big, but it's just who you have become along the way. You know?
As I started enjoying business more and actually switching my thought process that I had early on, that was when I started seeing the vision of like having a team and hiring and really building something. Whereas, before when I started, it was a necessity, but it was also kind of cool to be like, wow, you can make a lot of money doing this by yourself.
It's also great to go on vacation and have $20,000 hit the business bank account and you're not doing anything at all. Right? You're like,
remember that.
I remember the first time that I made money, I was out on a vacation and there was 9 evals that came in that week while I was gone. And I had nothing to do with the phone calls or the treatment or anything. And I was like, whoa, look at that. That's pretty cool. Because before I would just lose money,
Yeah, Roger, I got an interesting question for you. Back in 2019, you discussed because I started my practice in 2018, and it's the same time period where Cash PT was pretty new at the time, and I started my practice out of necessity too. I got a question for you guys: is if there was a practice that was cash based and allowed you to practice the way that you wanted to and could go into their practice, do you think you would have ever started your own practice?
I 100% would have just worked for somebody else.
Yeah.
If that job was available, I would have just went and worked.
Yeah. Same thing for you, Caitlin.
Yeah. I spent months like interviewing other jobs in the area, and they were all the same. So if there was an opportunity, I would have jumped on it, because it's scary to like look off the edge and jump off a cliff.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting time with cash-based PT now that there's so many clinics that are scaling and bringing on other practitioners. So it's great to see that, there's a little bit of there's a lot of people leaving the profession too, and starting a practice isn't right for everybody. But at the same time, staying in a mill isn't right for anybody either. So they just throw up their hands and leave. And so it's great that some of these practices are scaling and bringing on other team members to kind of bridge that gap, so these people can get happy.
And that's also like it's how do you help more people, right? When you start bringing on staff, you're not just helping more of the clients that you're seeing. You're helping more people in the industry change having to go through the things that you've gone through. Like for us, it wasn't available. It was a necessity, right? It wasn't available, so we had to make it. And it was fucking hard. It's not for everybody. And we've seen plenty of people that kind of got into, cash PT early on that have realized that it's not for them, like running the business, that now no longer own a business, but then go and work for somebody else, since there's so many of them readily available. So I think that's a very good point. What about you, Ben? Would you have started it, or was there an availability for you?
I did a little bit of both. So I started similar in the sense of like I took a traveling contract in the Bay Area for 13 weeks of super high volume. And I ended up starting my practice out there, just kind of testing what would work and what didn't work, just for like 13 weeks. I'm like, hey, I'm not planning on staying out here. I'll go back to Iowa, where I'm originally from, and take what I learned and open a practice. And it took off more quickly than I thought. But at the same time, at the end of my 13-week rotation, I did find a cash-based practice that was about 30 minutes outside of where I was living at the time, and worked for them part-time. So I was working in a mill, working part-time in a cash-based practice. I was very transparent with them. I'm like, hey, I got my own practice, but it was 30 minutes away. So we didn't really feel like it's a huge conflict of interest. So I was working at another cash-based practice and then doing my own thing on the side, and then eventually quit my mill job and then did the 2 cash-based practices, and then eventually just went all in on my practice as well. So it was really valuable to be able to work for somebody else and kind of see what it's really like to like lead a team and have team members as well. So I was really lucky in that sense.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty unique experience, honestly, right? Where you got to get in and see what it's like and get kind of a taste of it before you really went all in on your own practice. And that's an informed decision of like, hey, do I just want to work for somebody else, or do I want to grow and because now I've seen what it takes, right? I want to grow and do my own thing. It's awesome, man. Good for you.
I think that also kind of brings up, like, you look at, so when you're in school, it's like a fishbowl. You're exposed to nothing else except for all the traditional stuff that they teach, right? And then most of the rotations are all insurance based. Now there's some cash clinics that are in there that maybe people come to and do rotations. But even now, looking at like having a cash practice and maybe affiliating with a school or allowing students to come in and see what it's like, I think that's also going to help people get out of the fishbowl earlier and see what there is out there, maybe help them kind of see, like how you did, how it could potentially be set up and what kind of a work-life integration, balanced lifestyle is possible. And then also compare it to the other rotations that they go on.
Yeah. We have students that come and just like observe for days at a time when they're not even on clinical, just because they're interested in cash-based practice now, which I think is pretty dope.
Now, what I think is insane, because I have a ton of friends who are physical therapists who, as they start to see clinical marketer grow into, what it is today, they're reaching out to me more and more, and they're completely clueless of what cash physical therapy is and how it works. So it's very clear that, as they go through their education and go through their rotations, nobody talks to them about the possibilities and opportunities within cash physical therapy. Why do you think that is? And what do you think needs to happen from the cash physical therapists who are out there, who are running their practices? What do we need to do to help expand the awareness of cash physical therapy? Not to encourage people to start their own practices, but to show them that there's job opportunities that pay them well and pay them on the top percentile of what physical therapists make, that also actually give them that work-life balance that they think is just impossible. Like, where's that disconnect and how do we fix it?
I feel like part of it comes from the people that are teaching in the schools have been there for a fairly long time. I mean, maybe you get some adjunct faculty that helps with a lab who's a little bit up on what's happening more in the space outside of like the APTA.
Yeah.
But I think some of the things that could be possible are mentoring more students, having like affiliating with a school and having observation hours set up where they can come throughout the semester. Somebody could have a part-time position on a faculty. That way they can start impacting the system. But I think it all comes down to like the exposure, because when I graduated, when I heard cash PT, I thought unethical. I questioned like legalities. I'm really big on rules. And I had no idea, but everybody poo-pooed on it. And I mean, the people at the school were even like having a negative idea of residencies and other continuing education, because they were like, you're a doctor already. And I think that's just the mindset shift of a lot has changed over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. So I used to go and teach like as a guest lecturer in advanced spinal class at some local colleges. And that's where I would like just talk about cash PT, uninvited to talk about cash PT. Like, oh yeah, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is a possibility. You guys should follow me on Instagram if you want to chat more about it. Like, this is a road you can go down that's viable as a physical therapist. Because I know nobody was talking about it. Now, I feel bad saying it, but like going and doing that is very low on my list of priorities with all the other things that we have going on. So, but what I have been able to do is with some of the local colleges, I've developed the relationship where now it's not directly put in front of them because I'm not there, but anytime somebody is talking about it, like we're the recommendation that they say, hey, there's a place locally that's doing that. Go check them out, follow them on Instagram, shoot them a DM, ask them if you can go shadow, and you can find out more about it from them. So if somebody has the time and they want to get involved, right, just putting it out there and being more present in the colleges, or just developing the relationship with the professors or any professors that they had when they were in college, right? New ones. And you're absolutely right, Caitlin. That's where we've seen a little bit of a shift, is when like the newer professors are coming in, or the adjunct faculty that are like, they're hip. They're hip now. They don't have tenure. They haven't been there for 20 years. But I think that's it, man. It's just, keep it, and more people need to go on Instagram and make it like build their social media following, right? The more prevalent we can make it, the more social proof there is around it, then the easier it's going to be for people to find out about it and feel like it's viable for them, right? The biggest thing that made me feel like I don't know if this will work is because there was nobody around us that was doing it. I was the first one. Now there's 10 others I can think of off the top of my head in the area. When I first started, I'm like, I don't know if anyone's going to pay for this. Like my area, it's not super like rich around here. There's not like a ton of population. Like, I guess we're going to find out. What's the worst that happens? I'll get a job.
Yeah.
Right. Anything to add on to that, Ben?
No, I think it just goes back to a lot of the individuals like Caitlin and Roger highlighted. They've just been in their own little bubble in the school for a long time and haven't been able to keep up with what's possible and what's really actually going on. So yeah, I've spoken at a couple different colleges on DPT schools, and it is crazy on how little they know. Like I ask, my favorite question I ask them, hey, who's heard of cash PT? And like 2 hands raised. And then they're like, all right, what do you know about it? And nobody's like, nothing. Like the 2 hands I raised, like I've heard of it, I don't know anything about it. It's like there's just no education being done on it, which is absolutely insane to me. But it's always I've spoken at Sacramento State 3 or 4 years in a row, and the professor there is awesome, and he's like, it's one of the favorite lectures every single year. So he just asked me to come back, and it's just because of how eye-opening. Not that I'm a great presenter, it's more so like it's just so eye-opening to these students on like just showing them what else is out there and what's possible. So it's something that needs to happen more. So
it just has to come back because you're so handsome.
That's right.
No, I think like, and I want to move past this after this, but I think it's like, because I hear so many people, especially when they're brand new to cash physical therapy, who we encourage them to do 60-minute visits, and they just can't even like fathom what it is that they would do for 60 minutes because they almost brag and wear the fact that they can get someone in and out in like 15-30 minutes like a badge of honor. Like that is a reflection of how good their clinical skills are. And it never occurs to them that we got to treat the mind of the patient, not just the issue and the pain point that they came into the clinic to have resolved, if we're going to actually improve, the health and wellness of these people long term. So I think that's one of the big things that I don't know how we get that through people's minds. Maybe it is just owners making more content, pushing more stuff out there, doing more mentorship. But it's interesting to see just how, I don't know what the right word is. Brainwash is coming to mind, but I know that's not. But yeah, it's the systemic issue with like what healthcare is and what it's supposed to be. But do you see all that changing in the next like few years?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe the missing component is the how of or like the what. So when you're educating or talking to a patient, how do you do it and what are you saying?
Yeah. Right. But in regards to like the healthcare field changing, like we were talking about a little bit before, I think yesterday, it's like there's a lot of pushback when there's a revolution, right? When there's something, a big change, there's always people that are going to say, no, that's stupid. We're not going to do that. That's a terrible idea. It's unethical. It's whatever. And then there's a little trickle effect. And then when people see that there's more people doing it than not, then it'll explode, right? Like the story about the shopping carts, right? For anybody watching, shopping carts are a normal thing, right? But people used to just carry baskets everywhere they went. And when they tried to implement shopping carts, which is really more like a chair on wheels with like a basket on it. At first, nobody wanted to use it because nobody else used it. They're like, what are these weird things? We all just carry this, right? And so the supermarket owner that owned a chain of supermarkets, I forget his name, paid fake shoppers to come in and push the cart around, right? So other people saw fake shoppers using the cart and like, oh, we'll do that too. And then it became so mainstream and now everybody uses a shopping cart and you would think it's silly not to use a shopping cart, right?
Right. And that it's such a brilliant marketing strategy. And there's a lot of other examples of that. But I'm curious, like what book or what resource did you pull that from? Because it sounds really interesting.
So that the example from Robert Cialdini in his book Influence. Which talks all about different social proof and just the way the psychology behind influencing a lot of people works. But that's it. Like that's just the concept of social proof, right? Just like Google reviews, right? People come to us because we've got 220 or so Google reviews and they're like, oh, I don't know, this might be expensive, but look at all of these people that have good things to say. Must be worth it, right?
Right. So I want to rope this back to the beginning where we're talking about the different stages of just growing your business and getting back your time so you can focus on solving bigger problems. Because we all know the bigger problems we solve, the bigger impact we get to have, and the more enriched our own life gets to be as a reflection of the lives that we helped through that impact. And so at what point did you start to like build your team and like how did you get your time back so that you could start to transition into solving the new problem, which as we know from our previous discussions is just people starting practices without having the clinical skills to really represent the profession well?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think when you go to hire somebody, there has to be a few things, right? There has to be money available. There has to be an already full caseload that you're not planning on dumping, and there has to be leads coming in order for somebody to start making money for a clinic, right? And so then initially the expectation with onboarding is that you might see a little bit of a dip, but then you come back up. And so you're also investing more with time because you're going to have to onboard somebody and maybe in advance develop like maybe some modules that don't require your in-person time that they can do on day one. But you also have to build a relationship initially. So it's going to take more time and energy in the beginning when you're building a team for every single new person that comes on. And then after that, things start smoothing out a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people wait like too long to start hiring because they're afraid of spending the money. They're afraid of having somebody else rely on them financially. Like, oh, this person is relying, because I remember feeling that. I was like, oh my God, I just hired this person. Now I have to like support them and their family. And if my business goes under, like they're I don't know, their whole family's going to suffer, which isn't the case. They can get another job, right? But I never worked more than 20 patient hours before I started hiring people. I was like, this is it. I only want to work 20 patient hours. That's enough money for me with the cash flow, right? Like I didn't need to take home $10,000 a month. And I was like, I could keep working. I could keep it all, but I could hire somebody to start off with admin, to do the scheduling and the rescheduling and the busy tasks. And that brought me some of my time back, which I put into bringing in more clients, right? Which then I had just more clients than I wanted to take on. So I was like, I should probably find somebody else to treat these people. And that's kind of how that started for me. What about when you started hiring people in Texas?
Yeah. Part of it was the work became so much. I just kept expanding my schedule, which is not what I would recommend, especially if you're trying not to just be on a constant hamster wheel and feel like you're dying a little bit inside. But at that point, I started hiring. And by the way, the hiring process of just finding somebody and doing the interview process takes time. Mm-hmm. And so by the time you do all of that, now you're another month, 2 months, 3 months, depending on your area and how many people are applying before you can actually get the ball rolling on getting somebody in there and trained. And so that was something that I think lengthened the road for me a little bit, but it was when life became just a lot harder. And one of the other things that I made a mistake on was I didn't also identify that my clinical skill set could have been better. So then I was out like having to go get more leads all the time anyway, because I was just constantly losing people. But when I had all those people that were coming in and had the lead flow, like you can't do it all yourself. You're gonna burn out and stop enjoying what you're doing.
It's true. That's a huge part of it. Excuse me.
And Ben, feel free to hop in on this too. Like, I think everyone, they go through these stages where they just want to fill their schedule. But then, as you said, they get really busy and then they get burnt out and realize it's like, my God, like I'm glad that I'm living life on my own terms now, but now I'm a slave to the machine that I built. And in order to like get that work-life balance back that you had when you first started your practice, you have to buy back your time and you have to build the team. And it's a really, really scary thing for everyone to do. So how did you get yourself to just be like, screw it, I'm going to take another human being under my wing and take responsibility for putting food on their table? Like, how did you get yourself to get over that fear and just do it? And was it as scary after the fact as you thought it was going to be?
The power of influence and being told also that like, hey, this is scary, but this is where you're at and where you need to go. So like having a business coach that pushes you, like you have to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you're out here just trying to figure it out on your own, that's a dumb thing to do, right? People get coaching for like swinging a baseball bat and a golf club and like math tutoring, but business, this is just the thing that's going to change my life and set the trajectory for my life in my family's life forever. I think I'll figure it out. I think I'll figure it out on my own.
I think it's
that's actually a hilarious comparison because you're right. People get coaching to learn how to drive, how to swing a golf club, how to swing a baseball bat. But you're not going to invest in coaching for the single most important thing you're going to do in your life, which is building a business that can sustain you and your family. That is a hilarious comparison that I'm totally going to steal. That's great.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say it literally like lets you see what's possible, because going back to the fishbowl analogy in school, like you don't know what you don't know. When I started a business, I didn't fucking know anything about business, right? Like I'm just treating patients. I had no systems. I'm like, all right, that note's done. I'm going to go work out until my next patient comes in. And that was, the way it went for a while, but you have no idea what's possible, what the next steps are, unless maybe you have a mentor who has done it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I just happen to be really fucking good at treating patients, and that's what like gave me an edge. Well, I didn't just happen to. I put a lot of effort into getting the skill set, right? But I had no idea what I was doing in business at all either, right? And it's not just having the coach; it's also having the community of other people that are doing it. So when I'm like, oh, well, here's my excuse as to why I can't do this thing, and then Ben's doing it, and I'm like, fuck, Ben's doing it.
Yeah.
I could probably do that too, right? Like it's not impossible. It's just whatever story I'm telling myself.
Yeah.
Listen, if there's something that's important to us, Caitlin and I, we have a coach, whether it's business, whether it's our relationship, whether it's health, fitness, Doesn't matter. We've got coaches for everything that's important to us.
Yeah,
I think one thing that was tough for me was I was a new grad when I started my practice, and being like on an island. Luckily, I was working on another cash-based practice, so I was able to get some good mentorship there. But before I took that job, like I was on an island, and I know that's just the case when you start a cash-based practice. You can be very easy to feel like you're on an island, not just trying to learn business, but the clinical aspect of things too. And it sounds like you guys kind of experienced something like that too.
Yeah.
Right.
I love the if your friends are all jumping off a bridge, would you go jump analogy? Because in this case, you can use that power of influence for good, because most people, like for the hiring bottleneck, if my friends are all jumping off a cliff and hiring somebody, I'm like, oh, I'm at least going to think about that idea because other people are doing it and they're having success with it.
Right. Yeah, you really can't beat the power of proximity. I think that is the single most important influence that anyone can have within their life. People who are around you who hold a mirror up to your face and help you realize that you're thinking small, or that believe in you more than you do yourself, forcing you to like push yourself a little bit further, helping you increase your own belief in what's possible for you. Before I invested in coaching, and I was like, Roger, like Max and I are the tech guys. Like we are really good at figuring stuff out. We ran a software company for 4 or 5 years. We're really good at reverse engineering things and building stuff. And we wore that like a badge of honor for 6 years. And although we were on paper like successful because of things that we've done, we were completely broke. And it took us literally starving, like had to forego groceries so that we could pay our own rent and go without food for days for us to realize like we need to get some help. And ever since I've invested in that first coaching program, since that time, we've invested in almost $500,000 in coaching. And I have not had at least 2 coaches at a time for the last 4 years since then. And we've done some pretty cool stuff in that time. I think Ben last week calculated it. We have like a 32x return on our investment within coaching over the last 2 years. I think that was the stat. So people, if you don't have a coach, my God, like listen to this podcast, find a YouTube, find a mentor. I don't care who it is, but find someone who believes in you more than you do, because it is going to pay just massive freak dividends on your life, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years from now, even 1 year from now. We've seen people go from dead broke to having a practice, doing $70,000 a month with an entire team where they work from home now in just a year. So find someone who helps you believe that that's possible so that you have a chance at actually doing it. Yeah. That we could riff on for an entire episode. But I want to go into more on your story. Now that you've built the practice, you have given yourself the time and leverage. I want to talk about how you've decided to leverage that time. You started an education company. You started a podcast. Can you guys just tell us a little bit about what the podcast is all about and what the education company is about and what problem you saw in the marketplace that you're hoping to solve with it?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the education with the podcast and the back end stuff on there.
Sure.
So we know a fair amount of cash practices, right? A fair amount of people that are opening a cash practice right out of PT school. And what we saw over and over was that people were getting into cash practice and their skill set wasn't that great. So despite all of the sales things and all of the marketing things, I mean, Caitlin had this herself, like she mentioned earlier, in her Texas practice, before she really focused on her skill set, she would bring in 10 leads and you convert like 2, right? One or 2 out of them. And so she was just killing herself.
And it's so disheartening, like when you're not having a good outcome and you're working your ass off.
Yeah, and we would see that with all these different cash practices and new grads and whoever, like they're constantly out there grinding and they're not maintaining their client caseload. They bring in evals. Yeah, they would have low retention. They'd have low conversions from evals to plan of care, and then the retention on the back end, if they completed that plan of care, was terrible. And we just think it's unreasonable. Like, one, the way Con Ed is set up is terrible, right? Mm-hmm. You either have to do unreasonable things to get a decent education post grad, like completing residencies and fellowships. Like I had to drive 100 miles one way twice a week for 3 years, plus 100 miles for a weekend for a year. It cost me $40,000. I missed massive amounts of time with my kids. I was working full time. It was absolutely an unreasonable thing for me to be able to get decent at what I do as a profession, right? Or the option outside of that is you take weekend courses, you go, you don't have an actual system and well-organized clinical thought process. So you go, you take weekend courses, you get some tools, you come back to the clinic, you throw some tools at some patients, you hope it helps. It doesn't really help. You keep one or two things and you go back to what you were doing before. And now you just have random tools that you're throwing at patients and you don't know when and how to use them. You don't have great client communication skills to really explain things extremely well to them on like a 5th grade level that gets massive buy-in and gives them a ton of clarity and makes things make like black and white sense to them. Yep. And then you're struggling, right, with your confidence because people are paying you, $200, $300, maybe $400 a visit. And you're like, I don't really know what's going on. And then it comes through in those interactions. Mm-hmm. So we decided to cut out all the bullshit and all the fluff and just teach all the systems that I've put together from the residency in the fellowships and owning the cash practice of like exactly a system of how to evaluate and treat patients and then going in and connecting it to the actual performance aspect, right? Because so many of us work with athletes and people that go to the gym in a way that is like just so streamlined and makes sense to the clinician and makes sense to the patient as well, which is where the back end numbers come in.
Yeah, so that actually solved one of our major problems, which was one of the big reasons why we created it in the first place, because we had a problem. We had lost $200,000, right? We had
with bad hires, just as a recap.
Yeah, we had been doing in-house mentorship, sometimes up to 20 hours a month, right? And still not getting the right outcome because in-house mentorship, outside of like onboarding with systems, that traditional onboarding of a new employee is like, it's a lot and it's disorganized. Things don't start on time. There's no rubric to follow. And it's really not able to be replicated from one employee to the next when other people come on board. And so by creating this, and now it's also like part of just our hiring process because we're like, okay, how can we make this more efficient and get people more productive and set them up for success early on? And so now it's just, okay, well, this is our standard of what we expect a PT to be able to do, or like how we grade their skill set is, do they have this certification? Because we know that like we have given them the stamp of approval, so to speak. And so then how that plays into just growing let me go back to the hiring process and everything. The applicants that we were getting, you can't judge somebody just based on how many years they've been out. That doesn't tell you anything. Like I was spinning my wheels when I was in Texas and I was pursuing continuing education, but I was I wasn't bad, but I was pretty average. And when I got lost, it would come across when I was talking to people. And so all of that has basically helped us build the course and then shape the systems that we have in place to just have things run more efficiently and more profitably. But then
more profitably. I mean, think about it, like in-house mentorship, like you got to close 2 people's schedules and you're paying to be there, right? So now it's like the business isn't making money, it's losing money every single time we close it down for mentorship.
And then most of the time, everything else is reactive. Like you see the statistics or the metrics drop, and then that's already happened, and now we have to address it instead of having systems built out in place already. And so,
we've tracked with like some of the people that have gone through our cohorts. It's a 12-week mentorship clinical coaching program. Yeah. People that had all of Q3 last year, a 20-something% conversion rate, went through, and the month after they finished the cohort, they're hitting 80% conversions with absolutely nothing but a change in their confidence and their skill set. Like their sales systems, their lead flow, where they're coming from, like nothing else changed.
Yeah. And I think like that plays into, you talked about the podcast that we do now too. We are putting out as much free content as we can too. So like the podcast, the mini course and stuff that we have, because most clinicians don't know where to go. They've been in a fishbowl, or they've been trying these other like weekend courses or doing whatever else to try to level up the skill set. And it's just about making information accessible.
Yeah, just trying to provide value and help the profession level up as a whole. I mean, we hosted a whole 3-day long virtual summit that was completely free for physical therapists with strength coaches and everything. And we're going to keep doing that type of stuff. Probably do it one day live, quarterly summits, but just to help level up the industry. Somebody needs to lead from the front and take charge. And there's a lot of people that are opening cash practice, and that's fantastic. But now there needs to be a higher standard for the clinical care that's set throughout the cash practice.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's something that I predict is already starting to happen, where there's so many people starting cash practices that lack the conviction that is required to have a sustainable business. That I think solo practices are going to start getting swallowed up pretty quick, and it's because they don't have that conviction in their skills and to be able to not only get people to come in, but to get them to stay there, and let alone get other people to want to come and work for them. So I think what you're doing is filling such a massive gap. So thank you so much for just being badasses and getting your practice to where it is, and doing the hard work and putting in the hours and grinding to get your time back so you can fill this void that's, we all know, is a massive problem with the industry. So really, really excited to see what you two are building and where you're going to take it. What does the future look like for the two of you? What's the main goal that you're trying to do? Where do you want to be in the next 2 to 3 years?
We want to have an army of clinicians that are out there crushing it. Really, that's our goal, is to help the industry level up. That's it. It's the big picture.
I love it. Simple, effective. Really excited to watch your journey as all this unfolds. Ben, do you have any questions or any things that you want to add?
No, I just appreciate you guys' time hopping on here, and I think it's you guys are tapping in something that is really, really needed and really valuable for the industry, especially as so many cash practices are opening up. It's something that's really needed, and I think it's really, really great what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you guys so much for having us.
Yeah, of course. May the best entrepreneurs win.
Right on.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here. If there's for people who are listening who really resonated with what you're saying, who want to develop their clinical skills, or just want to be around and in your world and following you more so that they can model and replicate your success, where can people find you?
Well, we have the podcast, which is on YouTube, Spotify, really anywhere you get your podcast, which is just the Performance Rehab Authority podcast. And then you can look me up on Instagram at doc.Rog, R-O-G.
And my Instagram is just Dr. Caitlin Vela. Nothing fancy. Caitlin with a C, though.
Caitlin with a C. Well, make sure all of that information is in the description beneath this podcast or on YouTube, wherever you are watching this or listening to us. But thank you, everyone, for listening in. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. We love circling back and being able to help you implement what it is that we're talking about within your life based on your unique situation. And don't forget to like and subscribe and follow the podcast or on the YouTube if that's where you're listening to us. Have a good day, everybody. Peace.